everybody, how we doing today? So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to choose the right soft plastic for fishing the Florida Keys. Fortunately, I know a guy who started a company based on soft plastics just for the Florida Keys. Oh wait, it's this guy, that's right. So I've got an example of the All About the Bait soft plastic category all lined up. Going from the 2 5/8 inch paddle tail all the way up to a 9-inch version and everything in between. Then I'm going to go through the 4 different characteristics that I look for when I'm trying to identify which is the best soft plastic to use in a certain circumstance. Then to make it even easier, I think we're going to head out on the water and I'm going to show you those different circumstances, how I identify what those characteristics are actually on the water and which one of those soft plastics I'm going to use. So let's get started. Number 1, match the hatch. A very popular saying in regards to fishing, and that's why it is number 1. So when I'm prospecting or I'm going to go after a certain species, the first thing I start thinking about is what is its main food source, okay? And that's what I want to match. So an example is I got stuck in the backcountry out in the flats because it got too shallow and it turned nighttime and I was just drifting around and I just put my headlight down in the water and I saw all these little red glowing lights. And then I noticed they're just these bunch of little 2 and 3 inch little shrimp just sitting in the grass on those flats. You would never see them during the sunlight, but because those eyes glow when you light them up with a flashlight, they're very easy to see and they were everywhere. So that is where the Esky 3-inch shrimp came up, okay? Matches that hatch perfectly. So even though during the night I normally didn't understand what those bonefish and permit and tarpon were out on those flats looking for, as soon as I saw that at nighttime and saw how many were out there, I knew right away I needed a 2 to 3 inch shrimp, and that's how I got the Esky. Versus I'm out at Shark Channel at nighttime, okay, going after the big tarpon in the channel. You got the outgoing flow current there. And then I started seeing those red lights glowing in my headlamp again. But what I was noticing is that they're the bigger adults drifting out in the current, going out and about, and they're 4 to 5 inches. All right, and right off the bat, I knew, okay, got to get the Shimano. Okay, bigger profile bait that's going to kind of match that hatch. So no difference than all the paddle tails. I've got glass minnows, the 2 5/8 3-inch. That's those small glass minnows that we have here, baby pilchards. Now we've got the 4-inch flukes and my original paddle tails because that's exactly the profile of our local pilchards that we have. Going after the bigger fish, I've got the 7-inch fluke, 9-inch paddle tail, and that's our mullet species there. So very important, number 1, match that hatch. Number 2 is depth. We're talking top of the water column, middle of the water column, bottom of the water column. And it doesn't matter whether it's 1 foot or 1,000 feet. We want to kind of identify where we're going to find those fish. Are they top swimmers, middle swimmers, bottom swimmers, as well as where do they expect their food to be? Are they feeding on the top, looking for fish just scooting along the top, or are they just sight fishing any movement in the middle, or are they scrounging along that bottom looking for their food? Those are the factors that will help determine which one of our soft plastics, because each one of them are kind of made for one of those specific water columns and also dependent on how you rig them. Number 3, action. What type of action do we want our soft plastic to mimic? For example, I've got the paddle tails. They're a great working bait. As long as they're moving, that paddle is vibrating and just giving off some great movement there. Or we've got the flukes. Flukes are also known as jerk baits. So their action is imparted by the rod tip. So they're gliding along, you give them a little side pop and it jerks to the left and then jerks back to the right and jerks left. Or it's just gliding along, you let it sink, pop it straight up, and then it jerks back up to the top and then comes back down again. It's a jerk bait. Or for example, the shrimp imitations. They're more of a gliding bait. So they're swimming along, slowly do a slow descent, maybe get to the bottom, do a couple of hops there, drag it through the grass, just to mimic that real shrimp there. The other factor would be the environment that you're using these baits. You're in open water, you're just blind casting that paddle tail. That's my great search bait because you just cast it out and you just reel it in. That tail does all the work by itself. However, if you're skip casting underneath the mangroves, or you're bouncing it through the grass, or it's very weedy on the top of the water where you're working it, a bait that you can rig weedless would be very good. So that's also a factor. But action is what we're looking for that bait. Number 4, color. Now, a big factor that a lot of people coming to the Keys might not be used to is our water clarity. Now, I would say because of that clarity, 75% of the fish that I catch, I am physically watching them eat my bait and then setting the hook based on that because of that water clarity. So if you're coming from out of the area and you're not familiar with the Keys, you might bring those baits that are more apt for that murkier water where you need to have those the pinks or the chartreuse or the whites to have that contrast in that murky water. Our water is in general pretty clear, so you kind of don't need that, and it'll actually be kind of a turn off for the fish when they start seeing those very off colors. I actually go in the reverse direction. For example, I've got the Esky shrimp in the original color that was built just specifically to match the color of the actual shrimp there. I go in the opposite direction. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll throw the gold. And the reason for that is the sandy bottom, specifically on the flats fishing, the sandy bottom is more of a goldish, lightish, whitish cream color in the bright sunlight. So this gold actually blends into that sandy bottom better. So it is actually less of a contrast than this original against that sand. Because those fish have very good eyesight, they don't need to see this whole outline to say, oh, there's a shrimp, let's go after it. They're just realistically looking for just outlines, a little bit of movement, and then they're going to aggressively go after it. Because like I mentioned, I go out flats fishing all the time, but I never see those shrimp. But then you go out at pitch dark black with a flashlight and you'll see every square yard there's one of these little shrimps sitting there with those glowing red dots from their flashlights. But during the day you just don't see them. It's because they really do blend in. And those fish are finding them, but they're not seeing a whole profile. They're just seeing that little bit of a difference and going after it. And that's why I'll use this gold a lot of the time. But color very important, so think about it when you're coming down here, what might work best versus what you have in your tackle box. Alright, so those are the processes I go through to kind of identify which one of the soft plastics is going to be my best bet for catching whatever target species. But next what I want to do is go ahead and head out on the water. I'm not going to bring every color variation, but I will bring every style, one of every style, and then I'll work through those and kind of identify the situations on the water where I would use each one of those baits. So let's head on out. Okay, we made it on the water here, just came off the launch, just getting set up. So basically what I'm going to try to do is just hit a bunch of variety of different type of structure, different types of fishing zones. I've got the mangroves with the little underlying cuts there. I've got the flats, got the 7 Mile Bridge, there's channels. So I'm going to use this area as kind of a representative if I go out fishing.
these are the pockets I'm looking at, and then the corresponding soft plastic rig that I would choose. So let's get started here. Okay, immediately off the launch there, this area basin side is just full of glass minnows. Water's up. You can kind of see by the water is right up to the leaves, so we're getting close to high tide. But if you look down, this thing is just packed full of glass minnows. Usually when there's glass minnows, there's probably going to be some pilchards around. And my second observation is the pelicans. I see pelicans diving over there and over there, so that means there's bait fish kind of spread out in this basin here. What I'm looking at for bait wise is, number one, match the hatch. So I've got the 3-inch paddle tail rigged weedless. Because of all the mangroves here, most of the fish are going to be lined up underneath, not on the outsides here, but tucked back in there. So I want to be able to cast underneath these leaves and branches in order to get back to them. So that's why the weedless. Two is that I want to have a bait that's kind of suspended, so that kind of stays in the top versus bouncing on the bottom. My other choices would be a 4-inch fluke rigged weedless, or I would also go with the Shimano rigged weedless. The reason why the Shimano is it's quite a bit bigger than the glass minnows, probably even longer than the pilchards around here, but this has a little bit added weight, so when I'm skip casting, it allows me to get farther in there with more accuracy because I have a little bit of weight. These guys are just so light that it's very difficult to cast them accurately, and very difficult to get any speed to be able to skip cast them. So that's the 3 I would choose for here. Like I say all the time, oh, there's something there. You can see how far back the water goes, way back in there, because the tide is up. So even though we're on this edge with the branches along here, the fish actually can go way back in there. So we need that ability to cast to get into them. Oh, there goes a fish there. The species I'm looking at in here are tarpon, so they're kind of more of an up feeder, so that's why I'm doing a lot of weightless rigs. You can see some redfish, snook. Snook are also an up feeder, so I'd be fine with these suspension lures. I could just let them go down and sink and then start working them. But if I was looking specifically at redfish, I probably would go to something with a jig head so I can get it down to them right in front of their face, because they're more of a bottom feeder, bottom cruiser, bottom feeder. They'll come up top. I catch them on fly all the time, but in general they'll be able to see easier if that bait is in front of their face on the bottom. All right, we're set up on the flats here, the skinny waters, 12 inches or less. Right now it's probably about 10 inches there. Our target species is going to be the bonefish, permit, redfish. They're definitely bottom feeders, looking for those crustaceans. Like I said, as you just look here, you're not seeing anything. The little crabs, the shrimp are just stuck to the bottom or somewhat buried in the sand, and you're really not going to see them from our vision. But those bonefish, permit, redfish, they'll scoot around. They can see them, snoot them up, kind of kick them out, then chase after them. So they're after that little crustaceans hidden in here. So we're gonna match that by using the Esky 3-inch shrimp there. I use it with the 1/8 ounce fish head. Since I don't need a lot of weight, we're basically less than a foot of water there. I want it to be able to sink it to the bottom and then be able to just kind of slowly bounce it back. The other bait of choice, I'll use the Shimano, which is another shrimp imitation. Generally for the permit and the redfish, since they tend to be bigger, have bigger mouths, and they'd like a little bit of bigger meat there, bigger profile, I'll rig these weedless because we're running it through the weeds here. I use one of my All About the Bait weighted jig hooks there, soft plastic hooks, and that runs them weedless. They could pull through the grass no problem. The open jig heads there, they do have the hook exposed, but since they're pointed up and they bounce fairly well, they tend to not get caught up in the grass very much. As you can also see, this is kind of where, although I'll start with the original most of the time, if I'm fishing these grassy spots, a lot of times I'll switch over to that gold color. This is a good example of that gold kind of coloration that you get on the flats and the sandy spots. It's got that kind of goldish hue to it. And that's where I was saying oftentimes that I'll switch from the Esky original or the natural shrimp color and go to even a gold color, because that kind of more matches the bottom. So I think it blends in and it kind of becomes less of a distinct shrimp sitting there in the open versus something that they might not spot right off the bat and just see kind of a hint, a little bit of movement. And I think they'll be a little bit more aggressive about going in and just grabbing it right away, beyond just seeing something that's totally different and just sitting there and might be a little bit unnatural, and they might have to kind of ease up to it a little bit more. So that's the reason for that shrimp coloration change. All right, so here we are in more open water conditions. I'm kind of on an edge. The flats run over, then there's an edge, and it kind of drops off into this channel that runs out to the Atlantic. Now, we don't have any particular structure that I can see except for the channel edge here. There's no fish that I'm looking at that I'm going to target specifically. So basically, I'm going to prospect this area and basically fan cast and just kind of work the area looking for fish. Now, what I really want is a search bait, something that I can kind of swim pretty quickly to cover water. I don't want to throw a fluke or a shrimp that I have to like cast out, wait for it to sink, bounce it real slow back. Now I want something I could throw out there as far as I can, and at different depths bring it back at a constant basis, then throw it out over here, throw it out over here, throw it out over there. So for this instance, I like the good old original paddle tails. Okay, this is the 2 5/8 version on a 1/8 ounce fish head jig head, and then I've got the 4-inch paddle tail on a 1/4 ounce. The 1/4 ounce is going to give me a little bit more distance, allow it to sink faster. The 1/8 ounce is with the smaller bait, kind of matches up, lighter rod, flick it out there, smaller bait moving through. So just depending on what the fish are, you just don't know. So I'll have both of these out and just basically fan cast over and over here. All right, so this is the 2 5/8 inch paddle tail, 1/8 ounce jig head, and just cast it out there. Don't really even have to really put any rod action on it with the paddle tail, since that tail is vibrating as long as it's moving. And because it's a light bait, it's primarily just working that top. We're probably 8 foot of water here, so it's moderate depth. Smaller bait profile there, and it's just running across that edge, tail waggling. Then I want to start working a little deeper. I go to the 1/4 ounce with the 4-inch. This gives me a little bit extra weight, longer casting distance. What I'll do is I'll give it a second to sink down towards the bottom, and then I'm looking to target the middle and the lower water column. So if I do a moderate to slow, that'll keep it just working right along the bottom. I actually can stop it and just kind of swim it for a little bit, stop, and that just keeps it on that bottom. Or I could just do a kind of a moderate retrieve, and that'll keep it down middle water column. So all we're doing is we're just prospecting. We don't know where the fish are. We're just trying to put a bait in front of their face. And then I'm just going to keep fan casting till I cover this whole area there. So it's just working that nice middle, and just kind of just fan cast, cover this whole edge, and then maybe move down to the nether section and do that fan casting again. Now let's say, for example, I'm out on the reef or I'm offshore. I'll still use the paddle tails, but I'll up the weights to the 1/2 ounce jig head and then a 1 ounce jig head. I like to troll with the 1 ounce jig head. I could go pretty much as fast as I want to. That 1 ounce will keep it submerged in the water, still have that very great erratic tail action, sending out that vibration. And then a lot of times I'll have another rod set up with the 1/2 ounce with the 4-inch paddle tail, and I'll use that as a pitch rod. So if I start seeing fish busting, chasing bait, or if I'm trolling and I'm running into a school in front of me, then I'll grab that one. I can launch it a long ways, and I'm still wanting to kind of work that top of the water column, but we're just in super deep water. That 1/2 ounce works perfectly there. Both of these are the 2X strong mustad hooks, so they won't bend on anything out in the blue water either, so they're specifically made for that. All right, we're alongside the 7 Mile bridge. This is the old one, that's the new one there. As you can see, there is structure for 6 miles that way and structure for a mile that way, and then another run on that side. So there's definitely a lot of structure here. What we need to do is find the fish. So again, we're prospecting, we need that search bait. And again, that's where these paddle tails come into. We could still basically do the fan casting. We're gonna work one pillar, the other pillar, and then just kind of move our way down. I'm anchored up now so I could do the video, but in general, I would be drifting this edge, just casting in, casting in, casting in, casting in, and just working my way down. The 2 weights on the baits will make it work pretty good. The 2 5/8 with the 1/8 ounce jig head, that's more upper water column. You'll find the jacks, a lot of jacks, tarpon, kudas will be working that top. And then if you put the 1/4 ounce 4-inch, then I would be working the edges of these pillars, letting it sink, get into deeper water, and that's where you're going to see more of the snappers, groupers. So all these guys following it. So what we're just going to be doing is just kind of work, move, work and move, work and move, until you can find that pod of fish or find that fish, and just keep working it, because you've got unlimited structure to try to find them. So even though there's 1,000 fish here, I'm really not getting a bite, so I wouldn't worry about it. I'd just keep on going. A lot of times you might get a hit, or you'll see a fish come after your bait and you'll think, oh God, we got a spot, let's just stick here. But they get smart. As soon as they know that something's wrong, they shut down. So what I'm wanting to do is find that fresh fish that is just gonna instantly go after that, and then go after that bait without thinking about it, hook them up and reel them in. If I miss them, I'm just gonna keep on moving, because that guy, got a hit there, that guy is probably not gonna come back. They're too wary for that. Turtle McGruff. So I'm gonna unbuckle the anchor here and then just do some drifting and tossing. I might go on the other side, because the other side might be where they're hanging around. This is the current I think it's just slowly going that way, but they might actually be on the other side. The other thing I could do is just basically work it like a jig, wait till it gets all the way to the bottom, and once it's on the bottom, then I could start just doing some action like that, get those bottom fish interested. That's how you'll get the groupers, muttons, bigger snappers. An alternative strategy for the bridges I use is I target the slack tides, either the top of the high tide or the bottom of the low tide, hour before, hour after. I'm looking for less water movement so I can actually work the bridges. During the mid tides, the tide is ripping so fast, it's really hard to fish the bridges. So the 2 strategies I use is, one, I'll rig a Esky shrimp 1/4 ounce jig head, and then I'll drift by the pilings and I'll just pitch the shrimp down on the up current side of the bridge and just let it bounce back right alongside the pilings. And it's very hard for any of the fish to resist the little Esky shrimp. A lot of times, mainly the mangrove snappers, the groupers, will definitely go after the little Esky shrimp. Then as it starts getting to that magic hour in the evening, nighttime, I switch over to the Shimano in glow. I'll rig it weedless, And then what I'm mimicking there on an outgoing tide, doesn't really matter the current on that part of it. Basically the shrimp in the backcountry are locked down in the grasses, in the mangrove trees, islands and such. But when the tide starts going outbound at nighttime, they release and they'll follow that tide out to the Atlantic side. So a lot of the fish will be along these bridges just gobbling up those shrimp as they drift along the top there. So doing this weightless, kind of the glow, gets good visibility, and especially for the tarpon, really suck these up at nighttime. But you'll get the mangroves, muttons, pretty much everything is feeding at nighttime, so they'll key in on this 4-inch profile. Now during tarpon season, the main migration, the end of February through June, July, you'll get a lot of the full-size tarpon hanging around the bridges, and that's when I bring out the big boys, the 9-inch paddle tail or the 7-inch fluke. I'll rig them weedless, or I'll put on one of the jig heads, just depending on the time of day, what they're doing. And you're just basically mimicking a mullet, just casting out and just letting it swim through and watch them getting slammed. A lot of times on the outlets, the mullet will hang out in the mangroves along those channels. Then in the evening times, they'll start moving out into the channels, and that's when you'll start seeing the tarpon just bombing on them. And that's also when I'm going to use these big guys. And finally, we got this guy. This is the grouper rig. This is the one recommended over at Esky. They use this a lot for just having a bottom bouncer, going out to the reef, dropping this over, just get it a couple of feet off the bottom, put the rod in the rod holder, and let the boat's rocking motion kind of put the action on it. The current will get that tail spinning, it's moving, and you don't really have to do anything. You just get those automatic hookups. Otherwise, you could use it to drift the edge of the reef, slowly bouncing it. I'm also actually using these for Bahia Honda Bridge specifically, since it's a deeper channels there, and you could use this to work it for either grouper or even the tarpon during season. So that works really well too. This is an 8-inch glow grub, and that's the only color they recommend is that glow. But that's the 8-inch curly tail there.
All right, so hopefully you found the video helpful. If you're interested in any of the soft plastics, you can check them out at my store, www.allaboutthebait.com. Not only just for the soft plastics, but for each variety, I have a matching rigging kit. Also keeping in mind that upper water column, mid, and lower water column, because what's the use of having a soft plastic if you can't get the matching hook or jig head? So I took that in mind as well. So I offer little sample packs where you can get the soft plastic and a jig head of the kind that you want to try out. See how they work for you, if they're the right fit. Then I also sell the hooks and jig heads in bulk, so you can just buy them separately. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see you next video. Bye.